So today we're exploring the question that is oftentimes discussed in the context of blockchain or decentralized technologies, and which is essentially, can we escape politics with technological protocols? Or are we actually just recreating new political arena just within a different set of rules? And to discuss this, we're joined today by Santiago Siri, who is the founder of Democracy Art, Democracy OS, and Proof of Humanity. And Santiago has spent the last 10 years navigating this tension between technology and politics, and essentially journey from pure politics to pure protocol to end up in a situation of protocol politics. And so back in 2012, Santiago has co-founded Il Partido de la Red, which is Argentina's internet party, which is a particular political party where the representatives were committed to vote exclusively according to what the citizen will decide online. But after a little bit of time, politics actually proved a little bit frustrating and corrupted. And so Santiago pivoted in order to build infrastructure for democracy. Because the idea was, well, perhaps if we cannot fix politics, we can route around it. And so Santiago then created DemocracyOS and then Democracy Art and eventually Proof of Humanity, which are all tools that let communities govern themselves without having to rely on traditional existing institutions. Now, of course, those protocols that were designed to escape politics rapidly became filled with political struggle, with governance disputes and personal conflict that simply could not be resolved in a technical manner. And so, in this episode, we're going to discuss all those things with Santiago with a view to understand how, if protocols cannot help us escape politics, then how shall we build protocols that can handle the political tensions that they inevitably create? Thank you so much, Santi, for joining us. So, with this episode, we want to explore specifically your journey, actually, as you navigated through the various layers of politics and protocols, and then the politics within the protocols, and so forth. And then try to see how this can help us as we are theorizing and but also as we're trying to implement the network nations. And so perhaps to begin with, like looking straight into like your political work, you started in 2012 a political party where the goal, at least if I understand it correctly, was um, not to actually take power over the system, but rather using this power in order to change the way in which power is being exercised. And so you created Partido de la Red, um, and this actually was relatively successful, I guess, in terms of getting at least 1% of voting in Buenos Aires. And the idea was that the party will just be a proxy in order to express the voice of the people that will vote via the internet infrastructure. So, can you provide like a little bit of overview of basically what was the underlying motivation of creating this new party, and why did you think that the system needed to be modified in the way in which the power is being exercised?
Yeah, well, so I here have the original ballot that we used for the election of Partido de la Red back in 2013. That was the election we participated in the city of Buenos Aires. And during those days, 2012, 2013, uh, the world was going through a big transformation by the rise of smartphones. Smartphones being used in the activist arena around the world were becoming very relevant, very important. The Arab Spring, for example, was going on in the Middle East. The Chilean student revolution was going very nearby where I live in Chile. And it was interesting to see how smartphones, social media, these new networks enable new ways of connecting society and engaging people in political discourse, in political debate. And with Partido de la Red, we tried to put an innovation that had an actual impact in the political system. We didn't want to just be noisy activists making rioting or making loud manifestation of how we felt about the political system. In Argentina, we were facing back then, rising inflation and probably the sensation of being under a very corrupt political class. Things haven't changed that much since, but we felt that having a political party that was an innovation in itself, in the way it organizes itself, in the way that the participation is open to everyone, that uses technology, that technology is a tool for transformation. One of the things that we used to say back then is that technology is changing pretty much every single field out there in the world and being is disrupted by digital innovations of some kind, except politics, which still runs on the 18th century playbook of how a political system should be run, with a few innovations every now and then. So we had this crazy idea of making like a proxy party, like you mentioned, where we would have a candidate that is committed to vote every single bill in Congress according to how people tell them online how to vote. So was a way of making a more direct democracy with more direct participation with this proxy candidate. And we had the tremendous challenge of creating the party from scratch, getting enough signatures in order to get the party approved to run for an election, campaigning for that election, and making sure our proposal reaches everyone in society. That's the thing about democracy and about politics, is that you have to be able to make a proposal that's exciting for everyone, not just people that look like yourself. So we needed to learn how to talk to the older people. We needed to learn how to talk to people that were not interested in technology at all. The political system itself, which is also very biased towards its own way of doing things. And it was an amazing, I always call it like a Quixotesque adventure because it was a bit crazy. We did a huge Trojan horse to campaign in the streets of Buenos Aires, because our motto was everyone should get into the Congress, and our proxy politician would be like a Trojan horse attack into the Congress. We got 1%, 1.2% of the votes back then. An interesting fact is that we actually beat, like in our little fight of small parties, we fought against the libertarians, and we won against them. We got 1.2% and they got 0.7%. Fast forward to the present, the libertarians are running the country now. They have Milei. Back then, Milei did not exist at all. But it was an interesting proposal of using technology for politics. The real challenge was on the software. We were focused back. This is prior to smart contracts, to Ethereum, to everything that happened with crypto back then. We did talk about Bitcoin a lot in those days, and this is we had the challenge of making a software that would enable people to get informed, debate, and vote. So we did DemocracyOS, and it was an open source solution that very quickly got forked and adapted to different contexts and different organizations. We found in Tunisia, for example, an organization was using it to debate the new Tunisian constitution in the middle of the Arab Spring. Or in Spain, Podemos, which was a left-wing party that was getting started in the manifestations that were happening in Spain after the mortgage crisis there. They started using it internally for decision-making of the party. In Mexico, in Colombia, in many places, we saw the software being adapted and used by local activist communities. And it was, an amazing experience. We were a small party. Small parties tend to be eaten by larger parties in the long run. And the political system is just way too strong for a new coming party out of nowhere. But sometimes, I guess if you have more political capacity, you can achieve things and disrupt things in the world of politics. But it was an incredible experience, and yeah, we learned a lot from that. I ended up focusing more on the technology side of things than on the political side.
Mhm. But so this was kind of like, in the theory of activism, you have like those three different actors. You have like the insiders, the outsider, and the beyonders, all trying to change the system, but with very different approach. So this was quite of a insider approach to trying to change the system. And did you feel that it was successful? Did you feel that it was not at all successful? And what were the highlight and the downlights in this journey?
Yeah, the I think you know it was a very powerful experience. Getting engaged in political activism just gives you some kind of very powerful spirit that is shared with like-minded people. And thanks to the party, I met so many people from my city that were genuinely interested and engaged on the idea of using technology to make democracy more democratic, right? In that regard, I see the experience as one of the most memorable experiences in my life, and I don't regret any single thing that we did. In hindsight, we didn't win. We didn't get the party member elected. We needed like 3% of the votes to get it elected. We only got 1.2%. I think that was for the better in the long run, because I wonder that in an alternate history where we get the candidate elected, I fear that that elected candidate would get too corrupted by the system and would end up betraying the party and somehow ending on a larger party.
Yes, it was
I'm
a guarantee, right? It was like a
Yeah,
trust-based commitment.
it was a
And
trust commitment. Your political capital was tied to this idea of
yeah, yeah,
voting
of
according
course.
to how people voted.
And just curiosity, like how did you ensure the one person, one vote via the online platform?
Yeah, I think that's where we saw the limits. Our main approach was, well, let's make this software open source, right? That was the one tool that we had in order to somehow guarantee some kind of transparency of how the software worked to people. But obviously, that you can check the code, but you cannot check the execution environment or how the database is being managed, or or any of those things. One of the problems we identify throughout the process was that, like, for decisions that the party had to make internally, we use our own software, we ate our own dog food. But it was very clear to us, and or at least to me, that whoever had control over the database, over the servers, over the system, could in a very subtle ways, tamper any election happening in the software by allowing certain people and their family members to register to vote, and delaying other people, or making a much more a slightly slower process for other people to register to vote. So whoever had access to the centralized resource, to the server, to the database, can very easily manipulate how, on a sense, talking about a client server architecture, and this is prior to Ethereum and smart contracts. So it was very clear to me that whoever controls the database or the server, and especially on high stakes decisions where you really want that, you have two sides that they really are fighting each other. Democracy is not polling, or making a survey. It's a decision. A democratic decision is something you do when you have to make a difficult decision, not an easy decision. And difficult decisions are where, high stakes, two factions or more fighting for a resource, or fighting for power. And we went through those types of decisions in the software, and it was clear that there were, some players in any democracy will do whatever it takes in order to win, and whatever it takes sometimes means bending the rules. And we saw that. So any kind of centralized solution to our pretension of making digital democracy would end up being corrupted in one way or another. And it was like a dead end to build the architecture of the software that way, if we were going to be serious about doing digital democracy.
hmm Yeah. And then I guess you decided not to be an insider anymore and to become a beyonder. Um,
I like
and
those
then
definitions.
huh? I found them very useful actually, in terms of like trying to, and many people are a little bit of itch, but um, like I think the party that I had was clearly getting inside the system to try to change the system. But of course, the usual criticism that that insiders get is that you just end up being corrupted, because once you entered into the system, you don't want to change it anymore because now you have the
Yeah,
power, right? Um,
yeah,
so as a beyonder, then you started building another infrastructure, which is DemocracyOS, which basically, in my understanding of it, is really like a shift, moving away from the traditional field of politics, and moving into more of a protocol-based approach to governance. So, do you want to give a little overview of this system?
yeah. So what happened after the Partido de la Red experience is that with the technology we built, we feel well where we can do our best to push the limits on what we're able to do in terms of technology. So among many things that we tried, we actually applied to Y Combinator as a non-profit organization. And we were very lucky because 2015 was the very first year that Y Combinator allowed Latin Americans to participate in the program. So we were like a pioneering generation of South Americans going to California. We were also lucky, or maybe not so lucky. We'll see about that. But Sam Altman was the president of YC back then. So this
Mhm.
is Sam Altman before Sam Altman became Sam Altman. I have good memories of him. He was always very interesting to talk to and always very helpful. I have to acknowledge that. And so we got into YC, and we figured, let's focus on the technology side. I was kind of frustrated with how politics work, the experience of doing politics in Argentina, beyond just the mere fact that you're trying to run for a campaign or whatever, trying to get elected. All of those things sound very nice, but the nasty side of it is that eventually you will go through smear campaigning against yourself. So you have to have a thick skin in order to tolerate all kinds of trolls, haters, and malicious attacks of all kinds. That's just how the world of politics sadly works, pretty much in most places around the world. So you have to have a thick skin for that. And then you have to, if you're trying to do a new political party in any country, and probably in Argentina as well, it's quite likely that you will get Secret Service agents trying to figure out who you are, just to make sure that you are not a terrorist organization or someone. In Argentina, we had terrorist attacks in the past, and we had a dictatorship in the past. But I had to tolerate some like really strange situations, which now I would definitely regard the actors involved in those situations as Secret Service agents that were they were just trying to figure out if I was a terrorist or something like that. I guess they figured that I wasn't. But you start facing like very a very corrupt system, a very toxic environment, and is I got just fed up of the world of politics back then. I was young. I was trying to. I'm a technologist at heart, and I figured, well, I focus on building technology for democracy more than anything else. So thanks to Y Combinator, we did Democracy Earth Foundation. It's a foundation we started in California in 2015, focused on building open source, free software. Technology that would help democracies being deployed anywhere around the world at the lowest possible cost. And during the first years, we started doing democracy pilots around the world, working with local activist organizations in different places. We work with the Umbrella Movement in Hong Kong. We work with the peace movement or the peace treaty that was being signed in Colombia between the government and the revolutionary forces. And through those experiences, we always try to explore different types of democratic games and different types of technologies. And eventually, we drafted this document called the Social Smart Contract that kind of tries to put all of the knowledge that was available about how to do digital democracy on a collaborative open paper that anyone can can check on GitHub. And still to this day, I'm getting translations of that paper into different languages. And eventually, the rise of decentralization finally met its promise of enabling smart contracts thanks to Vitalik and Ethereum. I was an OG Bitcoiner since 2011. Uh, I love Bitcoin. I tried to build stuff with Bitcoin. I did all kinds of things, but it was clearly that it was not meant to be used for doing anything else other than moving coins around. When Ethereum appeared, it was a very exciting piece of technology that would finally kind of enable the focus on the challenge that we face around identity. Identity is the mother of all battles. If we were able to somehow figure out how to decentralize identity, then you could definitely have like a digital democracy that could work, using blockchain technology. And we started focusing on that, to the point that we wrote a paper called "Who Watches the Watchmen" that researches almost every single decentralized identity protocol that we were able to put our hands on. This is around 2018 or 2019. And eventually, all roads led to Proof of Humanity, which is this project originally started by Kleros, a French cooperative doing decentralized justice or arbitration systems. And Proof of Humanity, I always tell colleagues and friends that Proof of Humanity was kind of like Partido de la Red 2.0, because that's where we actually were able to implement the use of blockchain decentralization to the problem on identity, and in that way create the very first DAO in all of the Ethereum ecosystem that was truly democratic, and that was another amazing political experience in my life.
So democracy art before proof of humanity was about enabling people to do like liquid democracy, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
how did you ensure the unicity of personhood in the context of democracy art before the advent of proof of humanity?
We did different pilots, but all of them failed miserably. For instance, when we on the pilot that we did with the Hong Kong umbrella movement, we were doing Telegram voting with people that would register on a Telegram channel, and we would persist that identity on the Bitcoin blockchain, actually, using this new technique called Merkle trees that would allow on a single transaction to compress the information of multiple identities. And we got spammed, our Telegram channel, by what we suspect it was accounts managed by the Chinese Communist Party, and they kind of like took over the digital. We were trying to do a shadow referendum to elect a mayor for the city of Hong Kong, and they kind of like took over the Telegram channel and the Bitcoin transactions. And it was an interesting case where we thought that maybe we could put a barrier of defense on the cost of registering an identity on the blockchain using Bitcoin, and it was exploring also how Bitcoin could index a large list of identities at the lowest possible cost using the Merkle tree technique. And we underestimated definitely the interest that the Chinese had in whatever form of protest that was coming from the umbrella movement to be suffocated by the Chinese Communist Party. And that was a failure. We thought that Telegram was safe. It was not safe. We were exploring basically uh, interesting ideas that people suggested to us, and we tried to implement them, and we tried to figure out if they work or they didn't work. And in most cases, they did not work. In the with Colombia, we work with local activist organizations that would help us verifying the identity of people by uh, checking their national identity card. But obviously, that's a risk on the privacy side of things. So it was that pilot had around 12,000 participants, if I recall correctly. Mostly were Colombian expats that were living abroad, and there we tried to do a liquid democracy approach. that would allow people to vote on every single aspect of the peace accord between the government and the Marxist guerrilla. And it was interesting in the sense that we figured that most people were in agreement with the peace treaty, except for the one clause that was granting $15 million per year and 15 seats at the Senate to the guerrilla fighters, to the guerrilla. That was kind of like the deal breaker. And it was interesting that in real life, quote unquote, the no to the peace treaty actually won on the referendum, on the official referendum. We were doing this, like as an alternative referendum for Colombian expats to be able to share their voice on the debate that was happening around the peace treaty in Colombia. So all of those, and there were some others that I can try to, I need to remember. My mind is not so fresh anymore, but we did, there was another one, very interesting one that we did with an elected congressman in Argentina, Facundo Garretón. He was in Argentina. We were debating the legalization of abortion, and it was a very heated debate. And this congressman decided that he would vote according to the software that we built for Partido de la Red, according to DemocracyOS. And that was an interesting case because the vote ended up on the platform where the vast majority of the country voted in favor of legalizing abortion in Argentina, but the constituency of this legislator in the province of Tucumán, where he was elected, ended up voting against. So he, as a congressman, had to decide that whether he would obey the national result or he would obey the result of his province.
Just to understand, so because when you say like voting according to what the people vote on the internet, did you actually get a quorum? Like where was there enough people, or like how much people actually were using the platform to vote?
I'm remembering the numbers just by my own memory, but I think that this experience with this congressman had like it was a big number, like 40,000 participants. I mean, it was not. We're a country of 46 million. It was clearly something that was niche to the people that were paying attention to his own particular voice in Congress, right? And those who were
Mhm.
like activists that were either fighting for one side or the other. So it was not like fully representative of the country, but it was way larger than a survey, or way larger than traditional polling or some other approaches
And
to
in
that.
this
Even
context, how did you again, how did you account for the people? Like what was the one person one
No,
vote
it was
mechanism?
mostly email verification. It was not very sophisticated. This is all prior to the use of proof of humanity or stuff these
Mhm.
were all the experiences that actually led us to, yeah, we need to figure out, strong identity, or else anything we do is really can be gained or can be manipulated very cheaply. But yeah, those were some of the cumulative experiences of trying to figure out what it meant to do democracy in a digital way. As you know very well, sometimes obviously the challenge, there's always a technological aspect to it, but sometimes the challenge is just finding a constituency or just finding like a political context willing to adopt that technology. And sometimes we found the political context and we had to do something for them, whether we had the technology ready or not. And in those experiences, we were figuring out, well, all roads led to the problem of identity. And we got a grant to further develop decentralized identity research on that in 2018 or 2019. And that led to our joining forces with Kleros with the proof of humanity approach. And I would say that the proof of humanity DAO is the very first digital democracy experience with strong identity, even though still there we still found like
Mhm.
exploits and ways of
Mhm.
gaming the system that were actually very interesting to see as well. But at least the attacks now way more expensive than creating multiple emails or
Mhm.
multiple phone
So
lines or stuff like that.
do you wanna describe what was the solution that was implemented by Proof of Humanity?
So proof of humanity required video proof of yourself, which today I would argue that it's no longer valid because AI can do it very easily. But back then, this is all prior to ChatGPT and the Transformer and the AI revolution. This is 2019, 2020, 2020, 2021. You had to make a video proof of yourself where you show a banner that displays your Ethereum address, and that Ethereum address has to coincide with the address that you will be using to submit your proof. And it was an optimist system. The system, you have to put a stake of some ETH, and the system would assume that your proof is valid if in the process of 3 days no one challenges your proof. If in those 3 days someone figures, hey, this person looks exactly like this other one, or this is a civil, this is a duplicate, this is a deep fake, whatever. If your identity or your proof gets challenged, then you go to a Kleros arbitration court, and the Kleros arbitration court would decide whether or not uh, the 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 proof of humanity is considered valid for the registry. And it was an amazing approach. I think it was like a very interesting use case for Kleros. Kleros was looking for that use case in order to increase the bandwidth of their arbitration system. I was responsible for developing the UBI token. So I did a universal basic income cryptocurrency that would incentivize people to register on proof of humanity. So that was like the carrot in the system, where people, once they got validated on proof of humanity, they would get a stream, a real-time stream. This is a cool feature that I actually wrote the code for that, so that's why I mentioned it. But you would get a real-time stream of fractions of this token on your MetaMask wallet at the rate of 1 UBI token per hour. So that was the incentive for people to register. And the registry grew to the point of almost 20,000 verified humans. It was a fascinating experience because the DAO that governed the Proof of Humanity protocol was one person, one vote. We allowed for vote delegation, so you could delegate your vote to any other valid member of the DAO. So it was a liquid democracy. We had over almost 100 different proposals that had to go through 3 phases, like the ideation phase, the quorum phase, and the final binding phase. And all of these proposals were about protocol rules, parameters in the smart contract, the treasury of the DAO, or the rules of the DAO itself. And we had some of the most interesting debates that range from game theory to crypto economics that fought for power in this DAO. um, the DAO grew to the point where eventually it had 2 factions. And because it had 2 factions, it had 2 super delegates that had most of the voting power. That were Clement, the founder of Kleros, and myself as founder of the UBI project. It was interesting. For a long time, during I think the first 18 months, w- both Clement and myself had like 80 votes or 80 delegations each. Um, I had to brag a little bit that we were winning most of the decisions on our end, because people were complaining. I mean, Kleros, amazing team. I don't feel like trashing Kleros. I think they're amazing and they're doing onto great stuff, and they have improved many of the things I'm gonna be talking about for sure over the years. But there was this suspicion that a lot of the people we being challenged on proof of humanity were being challenged by for unfair reasons, or the reasons that they lost their stake, their ETH stake on their submission, because they did not take the picture properly, or they were not given a second chance in order to improve their submission. And a lot of people were starting to suspect that Kleros was just manipulating the system in order to trick people, in order to make bad submissions to the system, and trying to extract the stake in different ways, um, mixing money and justice leads to very strange incentives that might put the justice might not be. It's not easy to align money and justice. I'll just say that it seems wrong. It's like a positivist approach to justice that
Big door to corruption.
exactly, and we saw that, and a lot of people started complaining. So we started voting changes on the protocol, and those changes were not in favor of the interest of Kleros. Uh, and eventually, Clement, who is an evil genius, I think he has that element of him being extremely brilliant, but sometimes playing on the edge of what's allowed or what's ethical acceptable. He started farming delegations for himself with the users that were coming from Burma in Myanmar, because he had a girlfriend back then from Burma. Suddenly, all of the people that were being registered in Proof of Humanity on the same transaction, they were delegating power to Clement. And that was clearly farming delegations for him with people that had no idea that there was a DAO, how the DAO worked, that they were not given the chance to get informed in a legitimate way, in an open way to the dynamics of the DAO. So suddenly we were Clement and myself held most of the power of the DAO. And suddenly Clement was farming delegations in Burma. And that was like an interesting attack that eventually that led to the DAO proposing a new law that was that delegations were going to be accounted using the quadratic voting method. Quadratic delegations. So instead of counting delegations in a linear way, we would count delegations with a square root. The game theoretic angle for this is that this would incentivize people to delegate power to those who have few delegations and not to super delegates or whales that had a lot of delegations, and would keep the democratic spirit of the DAO going on. That also meant that I would lose a lot of power myself, but that the delegation farming attack that Clement made in coming from Burma would also lose impact. And we actually won that, and we implemented quadratic delegations. Glenn Weil, who is the author of a quadratic voting paper, both Clement and myself were trying to manipulate Glenn. Hey, you should support us. Hey, you support. And Glenn was like, don't bother me. Just don't get me mixed in your political troubles. But it was great because quadratic delegations meant that it would really put power back into minorities. It would break the problem of supermajorities forming in a liquid democracy. We that got voted. The fun part for me, at least, and this, I still remember the day I found the result of this, and I was so excited, home alone, looking at Telegram. But eventually, after voting the quadratic delegations, we voted to kick out Clement from the mission board of the DAO he helped to create. And that shows you that it's a DAO that is giving power to the people and not to the founders. And we won that by a 10 vote difference, like 565 to 555. And that 10 vote difference was a consequence of quadratic delegations. And to
Mm.
me, that was like an exciting political moment.
If you didn't use the quadratic delegation, it would have been the opposite decision.
I think so. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Mm.
It was
Fantastic.
wild. In all, to being truthful to Clement and to the Kleros team, they always accepted when they lost. A democracy that works is a democracy where the losing side agrees with the result. And truth be told, even when we were fighting heavily on the internet, like passionately debating about delegations and about the dynamics and game theory, and truth be told, Clement was always very respectful of the results of the DAO, as we were all. But obviously, himself being the founder of the project and himself being on the losing side of very critical decisions, he was always, he took up very well the
Mhm.
the political attacks our side made on the whole proof of humanity debates. But it was
Mhm.
exciting, and I think everyone, all of us, learned a lot. There were many battles in that DAO, but I'm proud that we were the one of the very few, if not the only, democratic experiment in all of the Ethereum ecosystem. Vitalik, for a moment, he never got involved with the DAO, but he made a proof of humanity for himself, and he, on a given moment, bought all of the circulating UBI tokens on Uniswap. So that eventually led to the UBI experiment also having a tremendous economic impact in a lot of people. And that was also like amazing to see, because then I heard the stories of many people that got benefited with UBI, and some stories were very touching, very powerful, and yeah, it was like an exciting time, because we were on the cutting edge of UBI, of democracy, of identity, of all of the political aspects that that are important in the Web3 world, and most projects are on the financial side of things. Our project, I think, it was on the more on the political end of things.
So democracy art eventually started using this.
Yes, yes. So we, everything, all roads led to proof. We were strongly committed to proof of humanity. Eventually, what happened is that artificial intelligence happened, and Kleros forked the project, so they didn't want to spend more time with the UBI team, or the people that were on our end. So they forked it, and they did a version 2 of the protocol on Gnosis chain, which works exactly the same way as version 1. There are not really many relevant changes.
Mm-hmm.
Still a video proof. On our end, we felt that video proof kind of it is an event in on itself, because of artificial intelligence and generative AI. It's like the AI apocalypse scenario that we sometimes used to when we were interviewing people to join the project. We always ask them, what would you do on an AI apocalypse scenario? And well, that scenario arrived with the rise of generative AI. I actually made some tests making fake people do a proof of
Mm-hmm.
humanity video, and it's impossible
Not being
to
challenged.
realize. Yeah, it really works. um so that led to, yeah, and then Worldcoin came. Worldcoin kind of took over the identity aspect. Worldcoin in Argentina became very big. It has almost 4 million users out of the 17 million verified humans they have. They have a different approach based on the iris and biometrics. Also, that's a complete different game to what we were trying to do with Proof of Humanity, and they're a private company, whereas Proof of Humanity was kind of like an open source project. Um, but uh, but yeah, and I guess that today I see this whole part of the game. The WorldCoin experiments is gaining a lot of traction. I wonder where they'll end up. I never scanned my own iris, even though they tried a couple of times to really put the ball in front of me. But we'll see. It's an exciting experiment. It genuinely has reached like very many parts of society.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so but nonetheless, I think like your journey is very interesting because it shows how you cannot really escape politics even when you try to create a
No,
protocol.
there's
That
no way out.
like protocol based governance is also politics, but on top of the protocol, but there is also this additional politics on who is in control of the protocol, like who are the governor of the protocol, which is a whole new layer of politics that needs to be accounted of, which I think oftentimes is a little bit forgotten, right? Like when people talk about like governance minimization and things like this, of like we want to minimize the people making decisions, but then there is always the people making decision about the protocol, which is where the real politics come about, right? Yeah, from like from all those experience that you had, like if we bring back the conversation around the network nation, which is what we're trying to build and theorize. Basically, network nations, they need like three separate things. First of all, they need like a shared space, which in this context is like the network, right? Is like the connectivity between the people. And then we need the population, and the population obviously require a concept of membership and therefore a concept of identity and so forth. And then it needs like the institution, which is basically the government structure for this population to govern itself within this shared space and infrastructure. And so you have actually been working with all of those things at different layers. So according to you, like nowadays in this particular time, when we're thinking about the network nation structure, what will be interesting? I will say I wouldn't say like the perfect because there is no perfect, but
Yeah.
what would be like an interesting or a suitable design, infrastructural design for membership, identity, and ideally also for like governance.
Wow, that's the open questions of every single day, and sadly, there's no formula or like closed answer to it. Um, I think that the elephant in the room these days is AI. There are amazing things to it that we can actually leverage and take advantage in order to enable better governance or a better human identification. And it's a very powerful tool. At the same time, it's a tool that we're still. It feels like we're still in the very early days of what generative AI or these new transformer models what they can do, where whether AGI will happen or not, or if is AGI real or not. We'll see, but certainly it's extremely powerful, and it brings back some of the nightmares doomers are asking, warning people about on the sense of, there are risks associated to the use of AI. At the same time, it's also a tool that's in cybersecurity right now. The sexy topic is AI jailbreaking, and it seems to be very easy to do. If you have different creative approaches to how you prompt these systems, so it feels that it's not the safest or the most secure way to do things these days. Maybe it's a mix of blockchain and AI in some way or another. I feel far away from having like a close, concrete answer. Like there are some clearly loose ideas that I'd like to explore moving forward into the future. Um, like, for instance, what if an AI can be like the executive power of an organization and has autonomous control of a blockchain wallet that has the funds or the resources of a community or an ecosystem of people, and you have to pitch that AI for a grant, and the AI will decide based on its understanding of the common good or the shared values of the community. Then that's something I would like to see in order
Have you
to sort
seen
out
the
of.
Have you seen the recent experiment from Anthropic? They did this very interesting thing. They created like this vending machine, which was embedded with an AI, and the AI was instructed to be a profit maximizer, to like just try to negotiate the price and like just try to make as much money as possible. And then during like the beta testing, they managed to convince the AI to become a communist and to give everything for free. And then
I
and
love
then
that.
they tried to create it again, and they were like, "Okay, we're gonna set up guardrails so that it's never gonna be a communist again." And despite the guardrails, the journalists nonetheless managed to manipulate, like just like it's just like psychological manipulation at this point. And then the AI again decided to give everything for free. Well, we have to be careful when we
That's
want to give the
fascinating.
treasury of a DAO to an AI.
My One of my favorite, well, you showed me this fun experiment called Democracy, where you can create an agent, and you write a manifesto for the agent, and you put your agent to debate with other agents, and they deliberate a decision, and you get to simulate a congress and a decision making on any given issue. I love these experiments. There's also this other experiment of an AI that is in control of a treasury, and you have to pay money to prompt that AI, and all of the money goes to the treasury. and you have to trick the AI into giving you all of the money available in the treasury to yourself. And I think that this AI went up to $50,000, and someone was able to trick the AI into giving the money to the person. And there was this recent thing that someone showed me. It was a video game where you have 5 minutes to negotiate with an AI that is acting as a terrorist, and is about to trigger a bomb. So you have 5 minutes to negotiate with the AI and persuade her or persuade it to not triggering the bomb.
Mhm.
I think all of these games and all of these exploration with how we can use generative AI in real context scenarios, and with the management of resources or money are extremely relevant. I feel that it's still not safe. It's still not secure for large experiments. My friend Matt Travisano, who recently passed away, but he's an Argentine legend in our hacker community here. He was doing this VC fund called Angel AI, and it's an AI that you would pitch on Zoom, and it would just interview you. You would share your deck and all of your company files, and the AI would decide in the next 6 hours whether or not it would give you a $5,000 check to your startup. I think that that kind of idea would end up badly very fast, because people are very smart when there's a bounty and they figure things out, and AIs are still building guardrails around them to avoid jailbreaking is seems to be very hard. Prompting, I think, is still a very nascent and very young discipline. We It's very strange when you write software for a or you write AI agents, because you have to kind of, like, you're like a playwright. You have to give the AI, well, if people talk to you this way, or they ask you this way, or they are requesting you this thing, you should do this or that. And it's sometimes not very clear that the AI would act according to what you expect the AI to do.
But maybe a model like proof of humanity, where you have the AI making decisions and then you have humans that can challenge those
Yeah,
decisions. You
I
have a
like that.
limited number of days in which you can challenge the decision that the AI made, so that if people are actually doing like adversarial prompting, at least the humans can detect that. But for every common and routine task, then humans don't really have to intervene, and the AI can do its own governance.
I like that. Humans can go crazy though. They can find, they can manipulate.
Yeah, yeah,
It's,
of course, of course.
also a project trying to do a Kleros competitor using AI to judge and to read, like, contracts written in natural language instead of smart contracts, called the Gen Layer. They're very young, but they raise a significant amount of money. We'll see how that goes. They're trying to really bring together the kind of consensus dynamics you find on blockchain, and using LLMs as nodes that would decide whether or not to execute a transaction based on the contents of the what they call intelligent contract instead of smart.
Now, the problem that I see with all those solutions, though, especially like it to me, it reminds me a little bit of the problem you mentioned for the Partido de la Red, which
Yeah,
is if you use an AI, most likely you have a large data center of GPUs running somewhere,
yeah.
which means that all of a sudden you are allowing whoever is controlling this server to change the prompt, to change whatever they want because they are doing the
Mm,
inference. And so all of a sudden, like all this corruption that you were mentioning, that if you have a centralized server, there is inherent corruption possibilities. When you use an AI, until, maybe I should say, until we get like decentralized compute um, mechanism in which there is no single operator that is controlling the running of the I will not trust running my network nation on OpenAI, right?
of course.
Or,
Yeah.
so all of a
Uh,
sudden you're like, we're recreating the same problem, mostly because AI, as opposed to smart contract, require a centralized server and operator.
Yeah, and that's the reason I think most of the, like, AI tokens out there were not really taken very seriously by the market, because yeah, anyone can, supposedly you have these tokens that would you allow you to make a node with an GPU and have an LLM in the GPU, running on that node, and you, if you get paid tokens, you would get give the person an answer coming from the LLM. But most people could actually just give you an answer that's cached on the DB instead of actually using the LLM, and you would get like an answer that is not really spending the money to use the LLM, and and that's why, if I think the new generation of Nvidia cards are, you need to do at the hardware level, you need to sign the fact that the computation was run on the GPU and not being just a database call on some random Amazon Web Service infrastructure call. So that's why AI decentralization tokens, that most people see them as a fraud. Well, at least some smart people I know, because you cannot prove unless you do it via hardware, via and I think that only the most recent generation of NVIDIA GPUs allow signing the computation with via hardware in some way, so that would give you at least a sensation that it was actually run by the GPU. I'm not a specialist on this topic, but I can tell that, if there was a successful AI token on the crypto world, we would realize by now, in terms of market value, and it's still there isn't one. So I guess the market is still not very convinced on how AI and blockchain can be brought together. But
There's a lot of experimentation, but yeah, I guess there is none that has reached a point of sufficient maturity to be trusted, except for like the trusted execution environment system, but it's still running on a centralized server.
yeah, TEEs. That's another one. That's another interesting piece of technology out there for in terms for privacy, and yeah, I looked into that some time ago. All of the last Dev Connect was around these topics, right? AI and blockchain. How they merge together, how they can work together, and I think still many avenues to be explored, and still very little results to be shown.
One last question I wanted to ask concerning proof of humanity and network nation. Um, would you say that to some extent the whole effort around proof of humanity was somehow a proto network nation, meaning like there is a global population within a particular registry with its own governance system, with its own economic system through the UBI? Like, does it look like a network nation, or like what was missing for it to actually be regarded as such?
No, I think it does, like a proto network nation, no, not a full one.
Mhm.
We were not singing the anthem of Proof of Humanity just yet, but it felt like a tight community, and like most crypto projects out there, right? I think Ethereum is also like a proto network nation, or Bitcoin is like a proto network nation. They're all like new leviathans, new bureaucracies that are being constructed around economic incentives, and certainly the identity element is one of the biggest components that we could use for the construction of network nations. There's also like interesting efforts like CK Passport, which tries to leverage or piggyback on existing passport or existing legal documentation coming from governments, and you could make a zero knowledge proof on top of those in order to make sure that you are dealing with a unique human without revealing who that human actually is, but you at least have the proof that human holds a valid legal document from a traditional a nation state. um but yeah, it's I think that these are all loose components, very experimental, that eventually we will see in our lifetime for sure the emergence of network nations that will have a lasting cultural, strong cultural impact, in the same way that Ethereum, Bitcoin, and many projects in the ecosystem have. Uh, you know, Bitcoiners and Ethereans, have very strong values, very strong principles. We know, where how, how our communities think and operate, and even though we fight internally sometimes for one thing or another, you just can tell. those shared values are expressed in the different community members. And I think that eventually a more complete solution that has the financial element, that has the economic components, and has the identity governance, and hopefully democratic components as well, will be like a much more complete and much more interesting, in my view at least, proposal to what we have, the strictly financial things that we have seen over the last 15 years since Bitcoin appeared.
Yeah, I feel we already have a few networked nation, meaning like we do have those communities which have this common sense of belonging and identity and to some degree kinship. But most of those do not yet organize themselves in this like true as self-sovereign infrastructure. And usually many of them relies on like centralized corporate entities or still rely on like the ideas of existing government. So it's like I think like identifying the right mix of infrastructure. Like I think the institution of the network nation is a very hard one to nail down. And I do agree we have like a lot of bricks, but we didn't yet fully understand what's the building that can be made that will actually empower those communities to self-govern, to mutualize resources, to like deal with all the administrative and governance stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, the road ahead is very long, and many challenges. I think that on a positive note, that the kind of experience, know-how, knowledge that was accumulated. I always look at the birth of Bitcoin like as an interesting milestone that led to a new generation of builders, hackers, programmers, activists, to start thinking in this direction. Uh, that the experience of the last 15 years has been significant. I try, from coming from where I come from in Argentina, with DemocracyOS and everything we have done since Partido de la Red and everything. I try to share as much as possible on this knowledge. So hopefully new generations will figure it out in with new technology or with better approaches moving forward into the future, but hopefully by not repeating some of the mistakes of the past. But I think that we went a long way. When I look at Partido de la Red in 2013, and then I look at the Proof of Humanity in 2022, and in that 10-year gap, uh, like I felt a leap. I really felt like a leap forward. We had new kinds of challenges, but definitely the improvement of going from just an open source solution to decentralized smart contract, the identity on a blockchain. Uh, it was exciting to see, how far we were, even though we were still like a niche thing of, hardcore geeks trying to figure out the future of governance. But those leaps are significant, that hold good promise for the future.
I think to me, what the challenge with all these decentralized solutions, which eliminate the corruption at the administrative level, um, but then and they are, I think they are good because you can trace and like it's pretty good as a governance infrastructure. But the problem is then the question of who govern the governance infrastructure. Uh, and this is like a different types of politics, but that's a very challenging one as well.
If you look at the DAOs out there, like Decentraland, just to give you an example of good friends
Hmm.
of mine, they have some people have controls of the multisig that controls the funds, and some people and the users have vote on the DAO. And many times what happens, and it happened in Proof of Humanity as well, what gets voted finds itself on a gridlock with those who actually have the de facto power of the multisig or the treasury of, or in Proof of Humanity, it actually did happen also. And you have this decentralization generates these gridlocks where you cannot enforce in a secure way or in a trustworthy way what's being voted on the actual execution of what happens in the smart contract. So maybe AI can do it, uh, but AI to this day is extremely easy to manipulate. So it's an open problem right now.
And AI has not yet a proper connectivity with those decentralized infrastructure. So that's
Yeah,
yet another
that's a
challenge
big
to
one.
tackle.
That's a very big one right now.
Okay, so just as a closing thought, so because you have like a lot of those, you have a big baggage of experience in this field, and like our little network nation collective maybe has also experience but different ones. um if you were to like give like, if there is one lesson that you've learned and that you would like to share to people interested in setting up new network nations, what will be like the key lesson that you got that you can share?
What's the key lesson? Let me prompt my AI here and see and see what she tells me. Um, one of the key things is that uh, you must make sure that you are like legitimacy is not declared; it's enacted. You need to convince the world that you matter, and quietly becoming something people can't do without. Um, you know, it's one of the at the end of the day, it's like a cultural challenge. Networks don't win by being recognized; they win by being used. And I think that's the thing. If you provide to people around the world like an exit that's useful for them, that really helps them, really gives them a place, then you have something very powerful. But yeah, well, I think it boils down to legitimacy.
So like acting already, like practicing the things so that
Yes,
people come to
yes,
you because they see you as being legitimate. But also I will say like legitimacy comes with this kind of guarantees, right? It's like
yeah,
I think the decision is legitimate because I believe that the process was guaranteed to be in a particular manner. So there is the trust based type of legitimacy, and then there is the confidence based type of legitimacy.
yes, yeah. Networks become real when people use them, rely on them, and uh, and they make all structures optional.
Okay, amazing. Thank you, Santi. Where do people go in order to follow up on what you're
Uh,
up to?
Anyone can follow me on Santi City. I'm almost on most my days. I'm on Twitter, also known as X, and on
Mhm.
Instagram. Lately, I've been mostly diving into the AI arena of things, but Web3 will always live on my heart. So I always come back to Web3. But yeah, you can find me on Santi City. I tweet nowadays mostly in Spanish, so you can easily translate with my content with the translate button. And yeah, looking forward to meet any idealist coming from this community.
Amazing. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Primavera.